Welcome. In today's episode, we explore the nature of the mind, what it creates, what it struggles with, and what sets it free, and how to know when our minds are taking us in a direction of limitation and being gripped by thought, or perhaps over identifying with the thinking we're having, and when we're moving in a more fruitful direction, or we're able to respond to what is actually real in the here and now, and how this exploration helps us in our businesses around problem solving and decision making. Today's guest is Clare Dimond. Clare is from the UK. She's the author of 9 books, including her most recent Shift, which is the 10 Truths of Profound Mental Health. And one of her early ones, maybe her first one, is called Real, which I loved. And that's the inside out guide to being yourself. Clare has a degree in psychology, but over the years, her personal passion has really been understanding the mind. And that's led to the creation of a global business in which she offers a number of programs and online experiences where they explore the nature of the mind and its relationship to money, relationships, habits, self-expression, and stress. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation with Clare. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and reflections. And if you find value in this conversation, please share it. Welcome, Clare. I am so glad you're here. Thank you for taking time to be with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Barb. What a treat. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, me too. I know we've been in similar circles and have seen each other throughout the last 10, 15 years of our businesses, but we recently got reconnected and you invited me to speak to your membership program. And just in those couple of conversations, I got excited to ask for a return on the favor, right? Because I think that what you see and what you share is really at the forefront of where I think entrepreneurship, business, creativity is headed, and in so many exciting ways, it's already there. And prior to hitting record, you talked about, and I may not articulate it exactly as you did, so feel free to add to it, but just that you're looking at the mind and the way it can potentially derail my language or amplify what we're trying to create in the world. And so I think that's just such a really simple yet like really layered and profound kind of avenue to explore today. So I'm excited to do that. And I thought we would just start out by, how did you end up here, Clare, and as a business owner, and in this particular lane of work, and how has it shaped the way you lead in your own business?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely come from decades of not feeling right. Yeah. And whatever I was doing, whatever job I was doing, or whatever group of friends I was out with, there's something, like it always felt like there's something wrong with me, there's something missing, there's something I should be being. And then I'd come home after a meeting or after an evening and just lie in bed, like going over in my head all the things that I would have said that would have like destroyed my career and destroyed friendships. And so there was this all the way through, and really from such an early age at school, such hyper self-consciousness, and which became a huge public speaking phobia, and all of it really like a sort of intense focus on me, whatever I was doing, like I was the big thing that had to be solved in this somehow, had to be secured, and it never could be. And I did so much stuff, so many courses and books and self-help things, and really all of them to like the most sort of extreme version of them. And some were helpful, some, like I did a yoga teacher training, which was wonderful, and things like that. Some things really brought in a lot, but still there was this central me problem that wasn't being solved. And then I read the Super Coach book by Michael Neal. Just came across that, and it was so fresh and interesting. And I thought, oh, this is something new here. And then that led me to working with him, and then with Garrett Kramer, and with, Pransky's, where I met you, and all sorts of amazing different coaches in a really brand new field that I hadn't encountered before, apart from through the yoga teacher training, which really was the first time that anyone had ever said, actually, what's going on in your mind isn't literal reality. And so yes, that was an amazing path then. I think that was really the start of an opening into really genuinely exploring what the mind is creating all the time. And yes, and then through that started looking at non-dual teachings, and it's all led really, and I love that we're talking about problem solving today, that it's all led to a realization that that core problem of the experience of what I am, the experience of existence, of me as a separate, like distinct entity somewhere in here that is choosing these words, that is choosing actions, that is a problem that can never, ever, ever be solved. And we can spend our entire lives doing everything to try to secure that, to make that okay. And it will never happen. All that will happen might be a few little mini sort of reliefs along the way, a few sort of affirmations, but ultimately they just fuel the search that one day I'm going to find peace and happiness and freedom. And yeah, and it was just a huge realization that it's the search itself, because the search confirms the idea that there's something missing, that what I am is this separate thing that can somehow be solidified. And without the search, there's just peace, freedom, happiness, pure potential, a mind that is engaged in reality. And that's what I find so interesting. And I'm really excited to be here with you, lovely, talking about this, because it puts us, I think, there's like two worlds, really. There's this world of self problems, trying to fix itself, creating conflict, creating projections everywhere it looks. And then there's another world, which is just a mind inquiring what's true, seeing what's wanted, defining problems really clearly, and then engaged in actual real-time information and data. And I think really all of life, every moment of life, is reflecting back to the mind. One world is futile and will never be solved, and the other world is nirvana for the mind, really. It loves engaging in reality and creating and analyzing and getting to the heart of issues. So it's really, the mind is set free in reality when it's dealing with what's actually true.
Yeah, I want to just build on that distinction a little bit. I think the way I can relate to that is when I was looking and, first looking at transformation and self-help and development, both inside organizations as well as mostly me. Like, let's be honest, that was, as you're saying, the real driver. There was always, like, I often say it's like for much of that time I was, why am I the way I am? Why did I do that? Why can't I change? What's in the way? What do I need to fix? So it's holding this idea of myself or of ourselves that, like, we're in the way. There's something we have to fix, rather than seeing the fluid nature of experience and really seeing, like, oh no, sometimes I'm self-conscious, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm not on my mind at all. Sometimes I avoid, and sometimes I'm doing without thought. Like, to really see this varied experience allowed me to start to see that, oh yeah, often the diagnosis I'm making about myself in a moment is coming from a potentially distorted place. And I'm not sure diagnoses does much other than just take me down rabbit holes of then what's the medicine and how do I fix. To your point, then I'm like in this narrow world of there's a problem to solve and the problem is me. Can
Yeah.
really relate to that. And yet, what I also hear in this other piece, when you say the mind is creative, it's essence, the natural innate capacity of the mind is to evolve, to expand, to problem solve. So there is a way that we aren't saying never problem solve. We're not saying the world doesn't offer you challenges. We aren't saying your everything is an illusion. But there is this like really rich exploration when you are able to navigate when the mind is generating a version of a potential problem or scary future. And when, if I hear you right, you're saying we're just in the moment responsive to life, in the moment responsive versus responding from a perceived idea. You
Yeah.
want to add to that in any way?
Yeah, I love everything that you said. On the last bit, I think is really interesting, the in the moment aspect, because it's I think what's really interesting, and maybe sometimes we get confused when we talk about presence, and that this isn't at all about not planning. And it's not, the mind is our mind's so able to plan, and that's one of the brilliance aspects of the human mind, is that it has got this conceptual capacity to represent people and situations and objects and concepts that can move around and can be moved into a future to plan a future. And I think it's so interesting that when we really understand that's what the mind can do, and that it's like playing chess, but it's not real, in the sense, like these things aren't this isn't the future that's going to happen. This is just a psychological playing, really. That the thing that there's a relative reality to things like, money and meetings and birthdays and holidays and, strategy plans and things like that. But the thing that doesn't have any reality is the concept of me. Like, that's the interesting thing, like our whole lives, that concept of me can be the be all and end all. But actually, that's the illusion. The thing that thinks it's going to be secured somehow in all of this just isn't going to be. It can't be. It's not doing anything. It doesn't exist as anything other than a mental concept. And so it means that there's mind is in the moment, in the sense that it's in reality. And that allows for past and future to be really fully understood and maximized, really. Yeah.
So, can you give like an example, either of yourself or maybe someone you've worked with, where that distinction, like, and how it played out for them,
Yeah.
being able to understand?
There's so many, really. Like, I think really with everything about ourselves, and every client, really, it's everything is coming down to that distinction of, is this about the unachievable wants of securing the identity, or is it achievable once in the world of form, like make more money? Or And so one example is, I do a money exercise with people, because often, people come in a course and they say, oh, I want to earn an extra, £2,000, say. We say, okay, good. We're going to take that on as a goal, and we'll write down all the things to do. Or, like, what's your plan? What are the things you're going to do to earn that money? And the deal is that the person has to write the plan that will give them exactly that amount of money, and then do all of those actions regardless of how they're feeling. Whatever the fear or shame or insecurity that's coming up, they have to do those actions. And the deal is that if they do those actions, the money will come to them. It doesn't have to be necessarily through those actions, but it will come to them in one way or another. And what happens is that in doing the actions, all of the unachievable ones around that money represented, that success represented, that being in action or creation represented, all of those unachievable wants that are about securing the identity will be exposed. So it might feel awful to launch a program or, sell some of our work. But when we do it, and this is the really interesting thing, when we hang out in that enormous discomfort that might actually feel like death, it really might, because the identity is so exposed and threatened. But we hang out in the discomfort and the mind stays curious, stays asking for what's wanted. Everything changes. The self is different, the reality is different, because the attention has moved beyond the projected sort of mirror world into actual reality. And I love that exercise. I really love it when someone really goes through, they see how it functions. Like we're held in a artificial reality that is created by our beliefs and our conditioning. And it's held in place by this sort of ring of discomfort that we don't want to go into. But when we do, it becomes really clear that was never true. And what was being protected wasn't even there to be protected. So it's that sort of freedom of mind and transformation that is so interesting, I think.
Yeah, there was one time I was teaching, it was actually in London. In the middle of teaching, I don't know, it was a small audience, maybe like 50 people. I started all of a sudden, I'm looking around teaching and I got self-conscious, like, is this going anywhere? Is this going well? And then I started to, like, have insecure thinking and wondering, and then I'm looking at everyone's faces and interpreting them and, like, just creating all this. But because I was literally in the middle of teaching, it wasn't as if I could, turn around and leave the room as much as I might have wanted to, right? I just had to stay the course and keep
Yeah,
teaching.
yeah,
And then what began to happen was I got off my mind and just started, and started teaching. And then that experience, to use was very free, very, very fun and very interesting. And afterwards, when I was walking back to take the tube, I had this thought, like, less of me on my mind, because it really wasn't until I got on my mind, right? And then started to, and it's just a simple example, not that we control that, right? Sometimes we're just in the middle of it. But it was really helpful for me to see that, yeah, there is this freedom of mind, this
yeah,
inner freedom that we access when, and just, another example, I was speaking at a conference and just enjoying myself. Then I got off the stage and I sat down and had the thought, was that any good? And because I had enough distance from the thought at that time, I watched, like, my mood start to plummet. And then that, like, and then I'm looking around and interpreting that, of people's faces, and it wasn't in my favor, right? But because I think I was just, I had more distance, it was also really fascinating to
yeah,
watch the mind,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then to watch, my mood plummet with it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, Barb. I think that's what happens is that in a way, I think the conscious mind, because that sort of central I just becomes less and less interesting, less and less gripped, I think, really by fear. The conscious mind stops being so identified, like looking through the lens of everything's about me. This is, they're saying that, what, am I a good person? Am I terrible? Am I a failure? It just becomes not relevant. And so then the mind is, or the attention consciousness is just freed up to like watch exactly what you've described. It's and it can be the reactions in the body and the where the attention goes, everything can be just seen. And it's really interesting. It's fascinating, isn't it? What and we can start to see what different realities are created according
Yeah.
to that grip of mind, whether it's there or not. And the whole experience of being just changes so radically. And that I think 'cause I think that's what drives my fascination more than anything, I think, is how one thing we've been looking at the moment in our reset course is the central fear we've been looking at. And how a fear, like a core fear could, as we're growing up, as the survival shifts from the physical, which is dependent on, sort of vagaries of people around us, and then shifts onto a concept of me. So there becomes this fear at the heart of the identity. And we've been looking at things, like if I try, I'm going to fail and I'll be rejected, those sorts of things, which are like a survival fear. And it holds in place this entire reality, the way everything looks. It's held in place by that. And when we start to see that fear can't be solved, it can't be, it's like a insatiable, a hungry animal. It just wants more, 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 more. And it can't be solved in that way. It just has to be understood and seen for what it is. And when that goes, when it's really seen, then there's nothing that is keeping the mind in that fixed reality. And it's liberated, it's really set free to then, I think, take on bigger and bigger problems in the actual world.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, like, free to do what? Or this may sound like an obvious thing, but I'd love to hear what you would say around what is what's good about a free mind?
Yes.
What's
Yeah,
good about
yeah.
that?
Yeah. Oh, what a great question. I love that question. What would you say? What do you see in it?
Well, the first thing is the greater perspective is really valuable, in a more gripped mind or when I'm looking to, what I did wrong or what's going wrong or what they did wrong, that it really narrows perspective, which means it narrows our capacities for creativity or new fresh thought. And so when I take the problem off my mind or see that that rabbit hole or even as justified as I feel about my opinion,
Yeah,
right? Like that almost is irrelevant, right? But because what I'm aiming for is more perspective, and in that place, we literally see options we didn't see. We see nuances. Memory comes back, and just certain things, and that all helps us. I think it helps us keep our bearings, but also it helps us make choices and decisions and keep moving forward. I think that's one thing. The other thing I'll just say is not having ourselves on our mind, but moving in the direction of where our hearts want us to go is just so much more alive than keeping one eye on myself the whole time and being vigilant about getting it right or making good, like, uh-oh, what's the outcome here? Like just
yeah,
that the experience of my life, the experience of my business is very different.
yeah. Yeah, I love that, Barb. I love that word alive. Because really, I think when the mind is in the grip of its beliefs and particularly protection of what I think I am, it's so old, isn't it? It's so stale, really. It's from childhood, and it was valid at the time, but now it's just keeping a version of us and a version of reality in place, and an ongoing struggle within it that only keeps it more and more in place. And when that is seen for what it is and the mind starts to exit from that, yeah, that now everything's fresh and alive, like you said, and there's like this sort of organic evolution because the mind is dealing with actual reality and actual problems, and so it's learning and it creates and it gets feedback, and because it's not doesn't have to protect an identity within that, then all feedback is useful. And so, yeah, I think, yes, I would say that the real advantage of the free mind is that it's sane, I think, really. It's operating in actual reality, not dealing with projections from the past. And that's what it wants. That's, in a way, I feel like that it's like an animal mind, really. It wants to be alert to actual reality and to take on problems that are really fascinating for it. Like each mind has its own different field of interest and expertise and way of thinking that when it really starts tuning in to reality, that is liberated. And each person then, I think, goes in their direction that is so true to them. Ironically, the more it becomes impersonal, the more the individual is really expressed. I think that's so amazing. Yeah. So it's real freedom, I think, pure sanity.
Yeah, I think that that piece there is really fascinating because, again, in our desire to want to make a difference or to have a business that funds our life and our families, we can almost, I think, rely too heavily on the formulaic and, every what worked for other people. And, listen, I think there's insight and wisdom in all that. And there are things for us to learn as business owners. So, and it's again that balance of, am I listening to that creative spark in me? Because I find the same thing is true, is like where our individual mind wants to take us, where our curiosity is sparked, where the things we see, the dots that we connect is for us. And ultimately kind of the way in which I think we bring our work to life, and just using whether well, I think it allows for the nuances in our work that, again, coming back to that word, make it more fulfilling, more alive, and potentially more impactful.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's completely unique, isn't it? That
Mm.
expression. Yes. And I think the other thing that I think is part of that uniqueness is the experiences that have led to that those fears and well the experiences that have led to the formation of an identity really that has to be protected and that has to have attention or love or validation in order to survive. Those experiences, when they're not driving behavior and experiences out of or current experiences out of fear, when they start to be really understood, what's actually going on and how is the mind really operating, all of that starts to become part of the wholeness of that individual. It's like the battle within ends, and these experiences become areas that the individual has lived through and survived really and championed really in a way that using resources and so much learning has happened within them that all of that now is available for the mind rather than it having to be pushed away. And so there's more and more capacity available. And like you're talking about the past and memories, I think it's unlocked really all of that when now that it's doesn't have to be pushed away because it's too awful to contemplate. It's like understood. And now an individual in a meeting has all of that to access. It's a huge deal, I think, really, this understanding of what's going on with in the human mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, that many people may speak to that in the sense of, some of those learned trauma responses, right? And I'm using that in a broad brushed way. But, the things we navigate, we learn as children to kind of cope with what life is and our
Yeah.
family circumstances. It's really fascinating to see how for so many of us, they become strengths in our potential strengths. But I appreciate what you're saying because when they're used in protection, what are we protecting? And yet, but when they're used because they help us relate to people, to be compassionate, to understand,
Yeah,
how people might be navigating a situation, then it's a way at which it comes forward in a
yeah.
beautiful way in service.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. Because used as protection is really to say it creates a self and it creates a reality. It sort of projects that past learning onto the boss or onto the colleagues that have got nothing to do with any of it, and the war plays out and the patterns repeat and continue. But when I think through we hear something or we read something and the mind starts to understand itself, then exactly what you're saying, it becomes strength, really, genuinely strength, isn't it? That capacity that the individual has learned through. Yeah.
So, what, if any, role or value does the identity have in business or in our life? And are you using identity would you use identity and ego in the same way, or do you see that
Yeah,
as
pretty
2
much.
separate things?
Yeah,
Yeah.
interchangeable, I would say. Well, it's really interesting, isn't it, because I think the identity or the ego it's an evolutionary advantage because it's a mental representation of the body, really, of the physicality that then translates into a mental structure of what I am. So it enables the body to be put into the future, past memories. It can sort of move into different countries. Psychologically, it's incredible facet of mind, and it's part of the human capacity to conceptualize things, to take them into sort of a psychological playing field so that the mind, through its imagination and creativity and planning and analysis, can work out problems just by sitting at a desk. Not It doesn't have to go and do everything physically. So the conceptualization of the mind is a huge asset. The one of the I think one of the issues is that in work, it can sometimes look like through our work, that concept of me is going to be secured. And that can create huge motivation to our detriment. It can lead to burnout, it can lead to exhaustion, and because we're trying so hard, or otherwise it looks so vulnerable that we don't try, we don't risk, we don't create. And so I think there are there's downsides to, well, for all of us in every field, downsides to the mind not understanding itself. But when it does, I think it's a phenomenal shift in someone then, because that and often I do really find the people who are most drawn to this conversation have incredible intellectual capacities, incredible imagination and creativity. And the problem has been that all of that force and enormity has been diverted to securing that sense of existence, that sense of me. And when it's set free, the mind, of course, retains its ability to hold concepts. And imagination now is really understood for what it is. And so is creativity, so is problem solving, so is analysis. And so the mind is operating in reality. And I think it's always useful for us to see wherever there's stress or a feeling of resistance or block or that sort of survival crunch, for the mind to see that as fascinating rather than something that has to be numbed away or distracted from. Like, it's rich, really rich.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think one of the biggest, I don't know, blessings or surprises is that in this direction is the discovery of how much we already have going for us. Like, those innate capacities, like you're talking about, the mind's innate capacity to create, to imagine options, to think ahead, to, all those things where prior everything in a way looked like it was up to
Yes.
me and personality and behaviors.
Yeah.
Really, that opening up of, do you know ultimately who you are and
Yeah.
what you're made of? And that discovery alone, I think, does so much for us, both in a well-being space, but also in a creative space.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, really. And it sounds woo-woo, but it really does take us to there isn't a separate Claire doing any of that. It's just not possible. Like even speaking now, how is speaking happening? How is listening happening? It's really starts to open up this world of the impersonal. It has such logical truth in it, and where the mind is just noticing, really noticing it all happening.
Yeah. Well, Claire, I would love as we kind of bring things, towards a close, what haven't you shared yet that is really present for you, maybe alive in your own work around this idea of problem solving, or as you're saying, the over identifying with ourselves in business, or this freer internal
Yeah.
space?
I think it is really around curiosity. I think it's the stark difference between protection and curiosity. And protection makes so much sense when there is fear running the show. But I love that you're doing this. I love that you're working in business, Barb. It's so brilliant that this message is reaching everybody, because if if people can hear, if all of us can hear and be reminded, myself be reminded again, that sort of threat, that feeling of threat, that feeling of insecurity isn't information about me. It's not information about what people think of me. It's information that currently the mind is embarking on the impossible, trying to secure something that isn't there. And so that stress feeling, I think the mind can literally rewire to see that as a flag of curiosity, an invitation to really explore what's actually under threat here, what's really true, what's really wanted, what actually is the problem that we're dealing with here. And that changes everything. It really does. And even in the midst of whatever we've got going on, whether anxiety or depression, or whether it's problems with money or the business, or that, always that question, like really what is going on here really is changes everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to invite people that, when you find yourself up against something, to just pause and ask what's really going on here. Is it
Yes.
what we think it is, right?
Yeah.
Or is there
Yeah.
something else? And let that inquiry take you to a new place potentially.
Every
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
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 I love that, Claire.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And I'm curious, I know that you do groups and you have a membership, or I think it's still active.
Yeah.
I'm just, how can people find out about you? What would you recommend?
Well, thank you, lovely. Yeah, claredimond.com. And so we've got in May, we've got a new course on this, actually, on problem solving and intelligence, and how the mind is liberated into the world. So so the details are all on the website. And
That's
thank
that's
you.
great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Barb. That was lovely to speak with you. Thank you.
As always, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean a lot to us if you could take a moment to first subscribe and follow wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Hitting the follow button means you'll never miss a show. All you have to do is hit the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you like what you're hearing, we'd appreciate you taking a moment to give us a shout out and review. Most importantly, however, if you know anyone that would benefit from this episode, please pass it along. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about my work, Innerverse Academy, or upcoming events, you can check out my website at barbarapatterson.com. You'll find some great resources, classes, and videos, and a lot more. Thank you again for being here. See you next time.